Hello gorgeous people, how are you all doing today? I hope you are all well. So she trying to swallow, I'm still a bit under the weather, hence still a slightly dishevelled state, but never mind. Welcome back to the kitchen, welcome to day 5 of my eating. Is it day 5? Is it day 5? I think it's day 5. I lose track of days these days. Because I'm still feeling a bit grim and grotty, I'm eating from the freezer again today. More of that in a second. The recipe with the sweet potato, I'm going to aim to do it tomorrow. I'm hoping that tomorrow I feel better. Last night I felt really rough, so I'm hoping that that was the peak of feeling rubbish and that now I'm on the way to being better again. Picked the wrong week to do this, didn't I? Never mind, but the point is, actually that's a good point I'm just making for myself, is that you know, even when I feel rubbish, I've still got to cook and eat. So, yeah, in a way, this is still a normal week. Anyway, right, so what am I eating today? Out of the freezer last night. So I've still got a load of cheese. So I did have cheese yesterday. I had a sprinkle on my fasolada. Oh, it was so lovely. It's so good with cheese on. I don't always have it with cheese, but I just wanted extra. And then I had my pea risotto in the evening, used a bit more cheese. So today for lunch, they're going to be drippy. So once again, these came out of the freezer late last night. So I put them in this big Tupperware so they can drip in there. With the cheese sitting on top, that's keeping that cheese chilled in the absence of a fridge at the moment. So for lunch, I'm having, I don't know if you'll be able to make out through there. Okay. That's leftover mushroom risotto. That's a massive portion. I might not need all of that, but it's defrosted. I could have 2/3 of it. Sorry, there you are. 2/3 for lunch. Reserve a third, and I could always have that as a snack tonight if I wanted. I haven't been really feeling very snacky recently. And then for my dinner. I don't know if you can make that out. That's the squash and bean curry. So these will be lovely things to eat today when I'm feeling a bit under the weather. The risotto, well, it's creamy gorgeousness, isn't it? And then the curry will be lovely because, you know, strong flavours, strong taste. Hopefully clear my airways a bit. Good. So in terms of cost, and then I'm going to chat about a couple of other things today because I'm not actually cooking with you. I'm just reheating. You don't need to see me reheat things, do you? So the mushrooms, so actually today I think is going to be the most expensive day this week because the mushroom risotto priced up at 91 pence a portion, although like I said, I think that's a bit of an excessive portion. So maybe I should have brought that price down a bit, but let's call it 91p. That's got parmesan in it. It's got the vegetarian parmesan and it's quite an expensive cheese. So if I'd made it with vintage cheddar, like this is vintage cheddar that I was showing you for the other risotto, that would have brought the price down a bit. But this isn't about what could have been, should have been, would have been. It was 91 pence to make that. And then my curry tonight, the curry itself, 48 pence. And again, a bit more expensive than it could have, should have been because I put that corn in there, that leftover corn. 48 pence. Now, I don't think I'm going to have it with rice tonight because I'm having all that rice at lunchtime. I don't think I need to have rice with it. And to be honest, I really can't be bothered standing in the kitchen. So today's meals combined, so I'm looking over here because I've got my maths written down. Today's meals combined are £1.39. So yeah, it's definitely the most expensive day this week, and it's I think it will be the only day this week that goes over £1, just £1. But bear in mind, it is 2 meals. Excuse me, and with the size of that mushroom risotto portion, it's more like 2 1/3, 2.5 meals. So yeah, so that's the costings. I will attach the videos at the end of this, the how to make them, as I've been doing all week so far. Now, one of the things that's occurred to me this week as well is, you know, in taking photographs of leftovers as well, which you've been seeing, is that everything looks a bit orange. It's partly the light in here when I'm photographing leftovers at midnight before they go in the freezer. But there hasn't been much green this week. So what have I had that's green? Courgettes, leeks, peas. That's kind of it. So what I could have done, and I probably will do it for next week, is just buy myself a big bag of kale greens of some sort, just some sort of greens. What's available in season at the moment? Cabbages. I might just buy a couple of cabbages. In season they should be a slightly lower price because that ought to be a glut. Because actually all the food I've eaten this week, I could have steamed a portion of kale, cabbage, whatever green leafy thing, steam a portion of it and have it with whatever I've eaten. It would go with pretty much anything. Not necessarily saying with every meal. So, for instance, with today, the mushroom risotto, I probably wouldn't have kale with that, but I could have a big portion of kale or cabbage, brassicas, some kind of greens tonight with the curry. Just that thing of thinking about eating a rainbow. Try and eat a rainbow every day. Certainly eat your rainbow each week. I just didn't think of it when I was doing my shopping, but having thought about it now, I think I will. I think I'll buy myself a load of greens for next week to have with either leftovers or whatever I cook next week. Okay, so that's the leafy greens. Now, the other thing is, and I've mentioned the freezer a couple of times this week already, excuse me. Yeah, I've mentioned it already because obviously I've been having my ready meals out of the freezer. I've been stocking the freezer up again with new ready meals. So the squash and pearl barley soup, there's pea risotto, there's fasolada, there's curry in there. Once I've made this sweet potato bean stew thing, that will stock up the freezer as well. So I've had I've been having a look through, keeping an eye on stock levels. When I do the summary at the end of this week, I'll do a summary of what meals I've got ready. But one of the things that does happen at this time of year, and it can be a little bit unnerving as a sort of a semi-self-sufficient person, is the freezer stock is going down and down and down. So never mind the meals I've made to put in there. It's all about the raw ingredients that I've got in the freezer that have come from the garden. So, you know, tomatoes, beans, they're my basics that I always have in the freezer. They are going down massively. I've totted them up here. In the past, I've had 3 freezers in the kitchen just because I've grown so much and I just need extra storage space. I've reduced it because in terms of selling the house, just to help the kitchen look as big as it actually is, because it's a big kitchen for a flat in London, flat in any city. It's a big kitchen. Put it this way, I'm sitting at a table, I'm going to eat at my table. How many flats have got a table in the kitchen? Anyway, so I got rid of 2 of them. But even if I hadn't, by this time of year, what would be normal for me is that by now, sort of mid-April, end of April, 2 freezers would be empty, pretty much empty and turned off. The final freezer by about, I would say by about the end of May is, in terms of produce from the garden, will be empty. There'll be a few ready meals and soups in there, but it'll be empty. So then at that stage, at the end of May, I turn off that freezer, turn one of the others on. Any of the last bits that remain in that one go into freezer number 2, while freezer number 1 gets turned off and defrosted. And then, of course, from June onwards, the garden starts producing, and so all 3 freezers eventually get turned back on and filled up so that by about November each year, all three freezers are packed to the gills. There's no room for ready meals, they're all packed. And then gradually over the winter, I should say the end of October, and gradually over November, December, January, February, March, they're getting used up, back to almost naught. So it's a little bit disconcerting for me this year that everything is getting used up, always does, that's normal. But what's not normal for me is knowing that I'm not going to refill it from the garden. But that's okay. I'll just, keep an eye out for bargain veggies when they're on offer, stock the freezer up. So, I have left, excuse me, I'll bring my list up higher so I don't, have to look down quite so much. What's left in my freezer in terms of ingredients, so not the ready meals I've made for myself, but in terms of what's left is for tomatoes, I have the equivalent of 14 tins of tomatoes. This week I've gone through, I think, the equivalent of 3 tins. So that would give me 4.5, nearly 5 weeks worth of tomatoes. If I did this entire same week of eating for the next few weeks, that would give me 5 weeks worth of tomatoes. But of course, I've got meals in the freezer, so I'm not going to cook necessarily every day. Anyway, 14 tins of tomatoes, 24 tins of beans. So last year I did grow less tomatoes. I just pared the garden down a bit. I wanted a simpler garden, less watering. But I still grew tons of beans. And of course, climbing beans, hardly any space taken up. So I've got the equivalent of 24 tins of beans. That's great. They're a really important staple for me as a veggie. I've got 2 portions of celery, chopped celery. Yeah, that'll do the next couple of weeks. I've got 2 portions of chopped up carrots. Great. So if I want to make a soup, chuck them in. I talked about portioning them for a soup, but actually I've kept them separate so that if I don't, it's rare that I would do carrots without celery, but I've kept them separate in case I wanted to use them differently. Peas, I've got 1 whole bag of peas in there. Cheese, I've got 2 100-gram bits left. Remember, a number of weeks ago, I bought a big 800-gram block of cheese. It's massive, and I cut it into 8 pieces, so 100-gram pieces. They went into the freezer. I've got 2 of those left. And pesto, I've got 2 portions of pesto in the freezer. So, yeah, never mind about the pesto and cheese. I've got loads of peas, tiny bit of celery and carrots, but the main thing is tomatoes and beans I've got loads of. But they will run out soon. I reckon, excuse me, sorry. I reckon I could probably, they would probably do me until, I'd probably get to the middle of June with that lot, end of June actually, because I've got some meals already made in there. So yeah, those things may last me till the end of June before I need to buy tins or fresh tomatoes and buy any beans. However, I won't need to buy beans because then I've got all my dried beans. Masses of them up there. I've got some in the bottom of my wardrobe. You store things where you've got space, don't you? So the thing with the beans from dried is, well, there's a couple of things. One, it takes a little bit more organisation and a bit more thought in terms of cooking because they need that overnight soak and then they need boiling for a while. Different beans need different boiling times. There are charts online if you need to look for how long to boil your dried beans for. Chickpeas, for instance, take 2 hours. They're the longest, 2 hours. So, yeah, I tend to leave the dry stuff till last for a couple of reasons. One, use the freezer stuff up first, just in case I have a power cut that lasts a couple of days. I have had power cuts here. Normally the power is back on after 5 or 6 hours, which is fine because the everything that's in the freezer, as long as you keep that door closed when the power's off, that should stay safe for 5 or 6 hours. But if it was to go out for 2 days or more, heaven forbid, I'd lose everything. So yeah, I always use my freezer produce first for that reason. But also it's that sort of convenience and thinking ahead, and sometimes, especially with the beans, I don't generally defrost beans the night before I want to use them. If I think, oh, I'm going to cook such and such a thing tonight, I might grab them out at lunchtime. Sometimes I forget completely, come to make my evening meal, my beans are in the freezer still, get them out, give them a quick sort of 10-minute steam to get the worst of the frost off, and then add them to whatever I'm cooking, or add them frozen. It just means you lower the temperature of whatever you're cooking, and it takes... Anyway, the point is, from frozen, you don't have to think about it quite so much. It's way more convenient. So once the freezer is empty, in the case of the dried beans, what I plan to do in terms of economics, again, it's about economics, isn't it, of cooking time and the fuel used on the stove, but also my energy and my time. So when I come to use some dried beans, I will cook up loads in one go. So instead of having, 200 or 300 grams done in one go, I'll do a kilo. I'll do a whole kilo of beans all in one go. Not because I'm going to eat them, but basically get them all soaked overnight, boiled for however long it takes, and then I've got loads of portions now of cooked beans from one session, one of which I will use that night for cooking, but the rest I'll then divvy out, put them in my Tupperwares, in my takeaway trays, and put them back in the freezer. Obviously let them cool a bit. And that way I'm sort of restocking the freezer with ready to go beans that, when I want to make something and I'm in a hurry and I've forgotten to soak any overnight beans, go to the freezer, pull a portion out. I know that they're cooked and they're safe already. It's just a case of reheating them in whatever I'm making. So that will be how things go forward from, I would say, end of June. Just get organised with getting some dried beans cooked up, then not put back in the freezer because they haven't come from the freezer, but get them into the freezer to replenish my freezer stock. Sorry, this is bothersome today, so I'm going to keep it shorter. So I'm eating for £1.39 today. It's an expensive day, but that's the mushroom risotto, and the mushrooms cost, I did buy a punnet of those portobellos on sticker. I think it was 30p. Scoffed them as a snack. Haven't had mushrooms for so long. 91p is a lot, but boy, oh boy, it was worth it. So gorgeous. Can't wait to have this for my lunch, and it'll slip down nice and easily. So yeah, I think that's about it for today. Hopefully tomorrow I'll be back on my feet, and I can't remember what I've planned for lunch. I'll have to look at... Oh yeah, I know. It needs to come out of the freezer. Tomorrow's lunch needs to come out of the freezer, and then tomorrow's supper will be cooking from scratch again, and it will be, fingers crossed, all being well, it will be this sweet potato and bean stew, which I'm dying to try. It's new to me. Let's experiment and explore it together tomorrow. Until then, lovelies, look after yourselves. Please stay lurgy free. It's just really annoying and frustrating me now. I want to get on with things. I want to get on with slightly more active things. I'm still getting on. Right now I'm burbling. See you tomorrow. Until then, cheerio.